Okay, what shall I say? Can you hear it all? Can you hear me now, Scott?
Yep. It's actually this microphone that's...
Humming?
Yeah. I'm not hearing you very well.
You're not.
Let's see. I'll try you again.
Okay. You want me to go 1 to 10?
I think that's good.
That's good. Okay.
All right. This ought to be good.
You think so?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Yes.
we're doing a little interview. Today is May 26th, 2012. So, and who are you?
I am Robert Dennis Sales.
Okay. So, 2012, you were born
I was born in 1933
1933.
at Nimrod, Minnesota, on a farm.
Okay, so that makes you 79 years old.
Uh,
Not
Will
quite
be
yet,
this-
79. We'll be in
this fall,
fall. So, when's your birthday?
November 20th.
November 20th. Okay. Let's see. So let's talk about childhood. You're born in Nimrod, Minnesota,
In the little town of Nimrod, near Nimrod, rather, on a farm.
and that's near.
Well, it's in Wadena County.
Okay.
And it's, I think it's about maybe 20-25 miles from Wadena.
Okay. So, as far as the state goes, that's north.
It's in
West?
actually the northwest part, a little
Okay.
bit. Yeah.
And that's how close to Brainerd?
Oh, I think Wadena is about at least 30 miles from Brainerd.
Okay. So, very small town.
It had one grocery store, 2 churches, and a gas station.
All right. So obviously you probably don't remember that, but what?
I don't remember much of that.
So you were born to whom?
To Robert Leland Sales and Agnes Mary Sales.
Okay. Okay. So you're a second Robert.
Yes.
Okay. And brothers and sisters.
I had a sister who passed away before I was born, named Virginia.
Okay.
And I had a younger brother, but he died stillborn.
Okay. So what kind of house do you remember much about that?
No, I don't remember the farm at all. Dad lost the farm during the Depression. He tried to send the cattle to South St. Paul because he couldn't afford to feed them anymore, and he didn't get enough money from the cattle sale to pay for the shipping them down to South St. Paul.
Okay. So the Depression, that would have been 30. Well,
Well, it was in
late 30s.
Yeah, the 30s.
Okay.
Because I was about 2 years old. I first started to remember things, and we were living on Uncle Gus's farm near Clarissa, Minnesota.
Okay.
That's was about a mile east of the old homestead where
Okay.
Grandpa Dennis Sales homesteaded.
Well, and that's where there's a sales farm there.
The Sales
Still,
farm, Sales, yes, the farm Grandpa homestead is run by Gary Sales, my cousin.
Okay. And that's in Clarissa.
Yeah.
3 words that best describe your overall life. That's a fastball right down the middle.
Boy, that is. Well, it's been interesting, let's put it that way. Very interesting.
Yeah. What's the happiest time?
happiest time was with the kids, and when they were growing up. We didn't think it at the time, but it was hectic, but we had a lot of fun.
Okay. Um, let's talk a little more about childhood. So you had basically no brothers and sisters. So like cousins around? Is that
When we lived in Brainerd, I had a couple cousins, Dwayne and Keith Hervey, that
okay?
but were about my age. Keith was about a year or two younger, and Dwayne was about a year or two older.
Okay. So your house, what did you have? Like a big yard, a small?
No. Um, let's see, the house in Brainerd had a very small yard.
Okay.
When I was first, let's kind of get a little history here.
Okay.
We lived on the farm on Gus's farm for maybe a year and a half or so, and then we moved to Brainerd.
Okay.
My dad went into business with Uncle Pat Hervey, and they worked in the little cafe called the Midget Inn. Dad was the cook.
Wow.
And they were the fryer of hamburgers, you might say.
Okay.
And Uncle Pat was the entrepreneur.
Okay. So.
And we had an apartment above the potato chip factory. There was no yard at that place.
Sure.
And I know one time I kind of ran away from home, and my mother was frantic, and she found me 2.5 blocks away in front of the Ransford Hotel talking to GIs, old World War I GIs,
Huh.
who were living out their life living in the Ransford Hotel, and had no one to talk to, and here I come jabbering away.
How old would you have been?
Oh, I would have probably been maybe around 3 or 4.
Okay.
4 probably, yeah.
Do you remember the name of the potato chip?
No, it was a local potato chip factory.
Okay. So Uncle Pat, so Grandpa Robert would have had how many
It
brothers?
was his brother-in-law. Oh, he
Oh, his
had 4
brother-in-law.
brothers.
4?
Yeah, there was 4. No, there was 4 brothers and 4 sisters. He had Grandpa Sales had 8 children.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that would be your grandpa.
my grandfather Dennis had
So had
4.
8.
Had 8, yes.
Okay. So Dennis, Robert, and Robert. Okay.
Okay, so then my dad's brothers were Marion, was the oldest, and then Robert was next, and then it was William or Bill, and then Virgil was the youngest of the boys.
Okay.
And the girls, it was I think it was Emma, and then Elsie, and Blanche, and Hazel were the girls.
So that's kind of a big family.
That was a big family.
Okay. So you moved to Brainerd.
Yes, we moved to Brainerd, and we lived at that place on, it was on 6th Street, which was actually the Highway 371 at that time. And because there was no yard, they moved to a place on Oak Street, Oak and 10th.
Okay.
And my memories of that place were, they had one summer there was supposed to be the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus coming to town, and lo and behold, a couple days before the circus arrived, I came down with a whooping cough.
Okay.
And I can remember I couldn't even go outside to watch the parade go by. I had to watch it through a window.
Yeah. Now that was a bummer.
That was a bummer. I missed the circus.
Okay. So no, that circus would have came. That time probably would have came on train.
It did come on train, yes.
And then they would have paraded through
town.
So that was a
Yeah.
big deal.
That was a big deal.
Okay. And Brainerd was not that big
There
at
was
the
only
time.
12,000 around.
Okay.
Then after we moved there, we moved to Pine Street, and that's where I went to kindergarten. That was the kindergarten was held at the Washington High School at that time. That was they had just one room. They had kindergarten there. I think the old school, which became the Lincoln School, was in bad shape,
Okay.
and I think it was going to be tore down. So
Huh. So
I know
you,
the.
you lived there for how long in
Oh, I'm
Brainerd?
not sure how long we was. I know I went to kindergarten there, and then the next summer my folks broke up, and my mother took me to one of her sisters and who lived near Clarissa.
Okay.
And I can remember my Uncle Tom Warner. He's the one that took me in on a Sunday to get baptized.
Oh, so when you were like 5?
Yeah,
Okay. So you remember where that was?
that was at the German Catholic Church in Briarville.
Okay. You don't do you remember the name?
Well, they had two churches in town. One was the Polish, one was the German.
In Browerville.
Yeah.
So two Catholic,
Two Catholic
churches,
churches
in
in
Browerville.
Briarville.
Interesting.
A little town of Briarville.
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
if maybe the Polish people didn't speak to the Germans. I don't know.
I'm sure that happened. Tilt that little.
Towards me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's much better because then it's more direct.
Yeah.
Because then I hear too much other. So.
Then we went to live at Aunt Audie's and Uncle Dave's in Fort Ripley,
Okay. And Fort Ripley is
Minnesota.
just south of Brainerd.
south of Brainerd, about
10, 15 miles.
17 miles. And I went to first grade there
Okay.
at the one-room school at the north end of town.
Which is still
The
around.
building's still there, but it's no longer a school.
Okay.
Then
No, would that be right on 371 too?
right on 371, Uncle Dave's farm was about a quarter of a mile south of Fort Ripley,
Okay.
and it was on the west side of the highway.
Okay. We're gonna have to look and see how this all fits, Uncle Dave and all the other
Yeah.
uncles.
Well, his last name was Morset,
Okay.
and they had, I see how many, I think they had actually 5 children altogether. They had a one son. Dave was a very young child at that time, and then the girls were Dolores, Kay, and I can't think of the other
Okay.
names.
So when your parents divorced, do you remember that? Was it I mean,
I don't remember the divorce. I just remember that Mom left, took me with her and left.
okay.
And then when Dad found out where we were, she then took me, and we took a bus to St. Paul and a train to
Okay.
El Reno, Oklahoma. And there we were met by my Uncle Bill Gabori.
Okay. So your mother's uncle or your
Yeah,
mother's
his brother.
brother.
Yeah. And we moved to a little town called Binger,
Okay.
which was, I'd say about, it was near, I'd say about 60 or 70 miles from Oklahoma City.
Okay. I'll have to look that up where Binger is.
Yeah. That's where my mother's grave is, at that town.
Okay. So you lived there from
I li-
5, 6.
I lived there until 1943, March of 43, when my mother passed away.
And what did she pass away from?
Well, she died complications from childbirth. Like I said, the one was born stillborn.
Stillborn.
Yeah, and she never did really recover from that.
Okay. So, well, then what happened? Obviously, you're
My dad, by that time, my my mother had remarried, and so had my dad. My dad married Lillian Krigbum, which was my stepmother, and my mother had married Lovell Kerbel,
okay.
and
So you would have been 8, 9, 8,
9.
9. Okay, so three years down there.
Then my dad was in the army at that time because war had broken out in 41, and he had a 10-day emergency furlough to come and get me. I think it was from Fort Devens, Massachusetts, all the way to Binger, Oklahoma. Get me, pick me up, bring me to Brainerd, and be back at Fort Devens in 10 days.
Wow. I mean that.
And those were the days before the railroad. I mean, before the airplane.
Sure.
So
Well, and that obviously that's a very traumatic time in your life.
well, it was a traumatic time hearing it over the loudspeaker of the school that my mother had passed away.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
there was no. That doesn't happen these days.
No, it doesn't happen these days.
Wow. So what? I mean, what were you thinking then? I mean, what? Obviously, it's a sad thing, but
Yeah, I know. I was at the funeral it was at the Catholic Church, which was about in the town 30 miles away, which was, I think it was El Reno, Oklahoma, and I still hate the smell of the incense
Oh, really?
from the funeral.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So what kind of an effect do you? I mean, when you look back at it now, I mean, what kind of an effect do you think that had on your childhood or on? I mean,
Well, I really didn't get to know my mother like I should have.
sure.
You know.
Yeah, I can't imagine being 9 and going through
Yeah, it was
going
tough
through
times.
something like that.
But well, the whole war period was tough times. I can remember that in 42 they closed school for 2 weeks during the harvest of the cotton.
Okay.
And I know I worked in the cotton fields picking cotton. It was my first job.
Oh, wow. Now, what would you what would you have gotten paid for picking
I
cotton?
don't know. It was just a few cents per hundredweight. In other words, you had to pick 100 pounds of cotton just to get the maybe 15 or 17 cents.
Yeah, for a couple pennies that I got in my pocket.
Yeah.
But obviously money was different back then.
Oh, yes, money was different. I remember where I got my first paycheck. I was thrilled, and I got to go downtown and have lunch at the local cafe.
Okay.
I went in and ordered a hamburger and a glass of milk. Cost me a whole dime.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure it was a good burger too.
Oh boy,
A lot better than McDonald's.
a lot bigger too. Of course, I was a lot smaller.
Sure.
And yeah, there. And I remember that when you go to the theater once in a while, the movies were a dime to go to the movie. And they usually, it was a Saturday matinee usually, and they had the cowboy movies and
Okay.
then a couple short serials, you know, like Jack Armstrong or something like that.
Newsreels.
And then they'd have a newsreel and a comedy, cartoon.
Okay. So how long would a movie?
Well, it'd be
Or
about
would-
2 hours, I suppose.
So 2 hours. You'd have a movie. You'd have a movie reel,
Yeah,
which would be like the 10 o'clock news kind of
yeah, movie tone news.
movie tone. That's actually how you probably would have heard information about the war. Then
Yes.
would be from a movie reel,
Yeah,
which is completely different than
It is
nowadays
now.
too. And nowadays it's instant.
yeah.
Um,
I remember listening to the radio once in a while. My favorite programs were Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy, and I think there was Gene Autry.
Okay, Cowboy. Gene
Cowboys. And my mother had a couple of soap operas she liked to listen to. It was Oxydol's Old Ma Perkins.
And so radio, this would have been radio.
This would have been radio. And Helen Trent.
Huh.
I know those were her two favorite ones.
So, obviously there's no television.
There was no television back then, no.
So everybody, you'd gather around the radio then?
Oh yeah, we all gathered around the radio.
That's interesting.
Then I know my dad was in the Army, and he came to Bingor to see me. He brought me a brand new wagon.
Okay.
And oh man, I thought I was in heaven when I got that thing. And then of course over the radio they said that due to the war effort they needed all the scrap metal and rubber that they could get. So all us kids in the neighborhood, as long as I had a wagon now, we went all over town collecting scrap and metal and bringing it down to the scrap dealer.
With the wagon?
With the wagon.
Huh.
I don't know if we got paid for it or not, but I don't think so.
No, probably not.
No.
But, you know, everybody. That's neat because everybody pitches in.
Yeah, everybody pitched in.
Yeah, that's different from today too.
It is. And back then there was no refrigeration, no refrigerators. Everyone had an ice box, and they had an ice factory in Bingor at that time that made ice.
Okay.
And then they'd bring it around to your door and they in 25-pound chunks.
So you take the 25-pound chunk.
Yeah, put it in the top of the ice box.
Okay.
And it kept the rest of it cool.
Now, ice box would be a wooden
box, yes.
How big are you?
Different sizes.
It depends.
Yeah.
Okay. But not like a big refrigerator like we'd have now.
No.
So how long would 25 pounds up?
A day or maybe two at the most.
Okay. And then, so that obviously that would melt. So
They had a drip pan underneath.
Huh. So you'd have to empty that periodically. Because 25 pounds of ice is quite a bit of water.
Quite a bit of water, yeah. Well, when I moved to Brainerd, when my dad took me to Brainerd, they still didn't have refrigerators at that time. It was still the icebox.
Huh.
Yeah, and I can remember that the Iceman was very popular in Brainerd, and I can remember that because he'd give you a little chip of ice he had the leather thing over his shoulder where he carried the ice, and he had a pair of tongs.
Okay. Now, would they have made the ice too, or is that they would have cut it?
A lot of times they did cut it, but you didn't know that. They'd wait till the lakes froze over around in the northern Minnesota, and then they'd get out there with a saw and they'd saw it into big chunks and then put it in an ice house and then use sawdust from the sawmill to put it in layers.
Yeah, they wouldn't have used a chainsaw.
No, they didn't have well, not a chainsaw. I meant a.
No, I was saying a chainsaw.
Oh no. No, they used a big old like a crosscut.
Okay.
And they had a machine with a wheel on it, and it would cause the saw to go under the ice and circular motion into a back and forth motion.
Oh, okay.
To cut the ice.
Okay, and then they would store that in
would store it in their ice house.
In an ice house interesting.
Yeah. And it would last.
Yeah, that's how long would it last all summer?
Most of the summer. I don't think they'd run out until maybe September.
And by that time it's cool again.
Cool again, yeah.
Huh.
A lot of people kept their stuff in the basements too because it was cooler in the basement.
Well, and that's, with refrigeration and freezers that we have now, I mean, so what would what would you typically eat then? What?
Fresh fruit from fresh vegetables and canned vegetables, canned fruits in the wintertime.
And then what would you do for meats then?
Well, eat what you could, Squirrels, rabbits,
Really?
yes, and buy meat at the grocery store. They had meat. Each one had a meat department.
Okay. Huh.
Not the packaged stuff you get these days.
No, not the mass-produced.
No.
Huh.
And bacon and hams. They were smoked and they'd last longer.
Yeah. So what was your favorite meal then growing up as a kid?
Chicken.
Chicken.
Yeah.
Did you have chickens?
We didn't know, but you could get chicken pretty reasonable
Okay.
at the meat market usually. And
Okay.
of course, Thanksgiving you always had turkey.
Sure. Well, that's tradition. Yeah.
Yeah. And Easter was ham.
Okay.
And I can remember Lillian making baked beans, and that was done with the pressure cooker
On the stove?
on the stove. But she'd cook the navy beans, she'd soak them overnight, and we'd let the pressure go up on the pressure cooker, and then take the thing off the stove, and when the pressure came down, the beans were practically cooked. Then she'd add the seasonings, and
Good?
very
Baking?
good.
So you, when your mother died, you were brought back to
Brainerd. Yes.
Brainerd, and then so Lillian is your stepmom.
Yes. She worked for Mrs. Mateg, who owned a lot of property around Brainerd. She took care of the house we lived in, which was 418 South 6th Street, and the big apartment building next door, and then the house on the corner, plus the house in the middle of the block going the other way.
She would have cleaned.
No, she collected all the rents and took care, getting all the maintenance workers to come and fix things that went wrong. Like if the furnace went kablooey, she'd have the guy there to do that. And
Okay.
so
Kind of a manager.
yeah, she was like a manager. And they had some commercial properties on Laurel Street, which was she had about a half a block of commercial properties there that she also collected rents from.
Okay.
And of course, my job was to mow the lawns in the summer and shovel the snow in the winter.
Sure.
Uh,
And so your dad would have gone back to the war then?
He had to go back to war, yeah. So he was he had 511 fighting days in World War II.
511?
Right. He was wounded 3 times.
So, okay.
And I can remember we hadn't heard from Dad for a while. Mailman came and he had a package. And Lillian opened the package and there was the Purple Heart.
Oh, wow. So they would have gave it to him right then and
They
there.
sent it.
Are-
No notice of any kind. And she thought, sure enough, that Dad had died.
Oh, sure. You get a Purple Heart in the mail, and
Yeah.
you don't have instant
No.
communication like we do now.
Dad was probably. I think I think that was the time he had the shrapnel all over the one side. He was shot once in the arm, once in the leg, and then he had shrapnel from a close shell.
Okay.
And that he was a cook.
Well, that's what I thought. He was a cook, so I don't know. I mean, you get wounded 3 times.
Yeah.
When I think of somebody back cooking, I'm thinking they're not anywhere near
No.
any fighting. So,
That was not the case.
so he would have traveled with the
With the whole battalion, yes.
battalion.
The guns weren't usually set up right for where the infantry was. They were set maybe a couple miles back, but there was always infiltration and That's
So he wasn't in the infantry, he was in
artillery.
in the artillery.
158th Artillery.
Okay.
Oops. Yeah.
So when did he come home then?
He came home after VE Day. He had enough points built up, so he got on a plane, and they flew him first to North Africa, and then over to Brazil, and then up to Florida.
Huh,
And
no
he was
direct flight.
And not a direct flight, no. And this was probably on a C-47,
Okay,
the
wait.
old Goonie Bird plane, they called them in those days.
Yeah, it was a big plane or a...
It was a two-motor job, yeah.
Okay.
But they couldn't, they didn't have the planes like they got today
Yeah,
back then.
yeah.
So
VE Day, when is it? When was that?
that was in, I think it was early part of the summer.
Okay. So
Victory in Europe.
So that would have been obviously a great time. Would everybody have came home that day, or was
No.
it period? Oh,
They shipped them home. A lot of them had to stay over there to take care of things and to get everything started for the occupation of Europe.
okay. So your dad comes home, everything's great.
Well, he's not. He has problems.
Okay.
He tried to work at the National Tea Store, which is a grocery store and meat market, but too many people. He couldn't really take it, so he got a night job working at the Creamy Crust Bakery in Brainerd, where he did all the baking.
Creamy crust.
That was the name of the bakery.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, the owner, Mr. Galpin, had invented a bread slicing machine. And one of the guys that owned a bakery in another part of the state wanted to see it, and he let him see it, and he made drawings of it, and he says, "Have you got it patented yet?" And he said, "No, I haven't bothered to patent it." So the guy patented it and sued Galpin. And
Oh, really?
yeah,
The guy who invented it,
Yeah.
he sued him.
no, not the guy that got it patented sued the owner of the.
Yeah, the one who originally. Yeah. Interesting.
And well, Dad was lucky enough to get a pension with the help of the veterans of foreign wars and the county veterans officer.
Okay.
And then about that same time, the Greyhound Bus Company wanted to buy the commercial property in downtown Brainerd that Mrs. Mateg owned, and they gave her a little commission if she would have convinced Mrs. Mateg to sell that property.
Okay.
So she did her best, and the Greyhound Bus bought the property and put the depot in.
Okay.
It was on 3rd and Laurel. That's where the depot was
Okay.
at that time. Yeah, we moved up to Pine River at that time.
Oh, okay. So you
And-
moved again.
Yeah,
Gypsies.
gypsies. Well, in Brainerd, I went to finish 3rd grade, and 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in Brainerd. Finished the 3rd through the 6th was at Lincoln School, elementary school, and then the 7th and 8th grade was at Franklin Junior High School.
Okay. And then you moved to Pine River.
Then we moved to Pine River, where I started high school.
High school.
9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th there.
And so why move to Pine River? Do you know why?
Well, you get a quiet place.
A 12,000 town of 12,000 needs a quiet place.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
And Dad could grow a garden,
Okay.
and we had triangular shaped lot with 100 feet of lakeshore, and it was pie shaped,
Okay.
and we had a
So-
big garden.
Lakeshore would have been the biggest part?
No, only 100 feet.
Ah. Okay.
Yeah, it was. We had a big strawberry patch and raised all kinds of. We had corn, potatoes, and carrots, and parsnips, and beets, and it. Most of the work was hand work. We didn't have a tractor or anything like that.
Hard work.
Hard work.
Okay.
And Dad decided it was kind of a sloping lot, so he decided to build a retaining wall between the low and the higher area. So we went and got rock from a nearby gravel pit. We built a rock wall about 4 feet high and about maybe 120 feet long,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
leveled off the yard there.
And what lake would that?
That was Norway Lake,
Norway Lake in Pine River.
right at Pine River. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how long did you live there then?
We lived there. Well, they lived there for. I went to high school. I graduated from high school. Came down and went to college, and spent about 3 years down in the university till I ran out of money. And Uncle Sam beckoned, and into the service I went for 2 years.
Okay.
And while I was in service, they sold the place and moved back to Brainerd.
Okay.
So
So back into town.
yeah.
I know you had a dog when you grew up.
Oh yes, at Pine River, yeah. Skipper, smartest dog I ever saw.
Okay. Well, what kind of dog was Skipper?
He was part Spitz and part husky.
Uh,
He was all white, and his tail curled over his back,
okay.
and
So why was he the smartest dog you've ever met?
Well, one time there was one of the neighbors had company, and the little toddler wandered away from them, came down to our lake, and I heard them crying. All of a sudden, I went, and there was Skipper pulling the little tyke away from the lake.
Hmm.
Just knew that didn't belong there,
Okay.
and kids could pull his tail, pull his ears, and never harm him a bit. But you let an adult try that, and you got a fighting dog on your hands.
Yeah.
And he would guard the car when we went to town. And he used to sit in the back seat. I'd sit on one side, and Skipper would sit on the other. He'd sit on the seat with his paw over the armrest, and his nose stuck out the window.
Huh.
He was a character, but he was a really nice dog.
Okay. And did you get him when he was a puppy or?
He was pretty well full grown when we got him.
Okay.
We got him right after he moved up there, and he was Dad's dog. He used to sit on Dad's lap.
Huh.
Lillian said, "There's no dog going to be in our house." First cold snap, dog stood out there and looked at her with those big brown eyes. In the house he came.
Change that.
The dog wouldn't. It was kind of funny on people. The old doctor we had in town. We had 2 doctors in town, the old one and the young one. The old doctor could come and go, no problem, but the young doctor couldn't get out of his car.
Why is
Did
that?
not like him.
He's a good judge of character.
Oh, a good judge of character. Yeah,
Interesting.
and yeah, I remember that we went to see. My cousin Dwayne gave Dad 2 rabbits to raise, and because he couldn't keep them anymore, and we had problems raising little rabbits because the mink and the skunks were getting them all when they were in hutches,
Okay.
above ground. So Dad got disgusted and let them dig under the garage. We didn't have any problem after that. Raised
Huh.
lots of little rabbits. I remember one time we were in town would come out, and this is about July, and the lights from the car shone on the road, and there was a yard full of white little bunnies.
Oh, wow.
They had dug out the other side, and Skipper caught most of them. Didn't harm them at all. Would have them laying down with one paw over one and catch the others. And he caught most of them for us
So you would have raised rabbits for what? For dinner?
for dinner.
Okay.
Rabbit is very good.
I'll take your word for it. Okay.
And hunting, deer. Dad was hunting deer and ducks.
Whatever you could get.
Hmm
What about fishing?
Fishing, oh yes. Lillian wouldn't eat fish, but she'd fry it up.
Huh.
And we'd have fall rough grouse. Very good.
Okay. So hence all the wild game recipes in the old cookbooks you
That's
find.
it.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay.
I know one of the guys that worked with said he was 14 years old before he tasted beef. He lived at Grand Rapids, Minnesota.
Okay. 14 years old before he had beef.
Yeah.
Need a break?
Oh, I keep on going, I guess.
All right.
And during high school, I had a part-time job for worked at the Red Owl store. I was a stock boy and sweeper of the floors, carry-out boy, and a order taker for resorts that call in. They needed so much, and I'd get it ready. And usually the mail person postal worker would deliver it.
Okay. You would have been that's in high school.
That was in high school, yeah.
So you've been 14, 15?
I suppose 14. Before that, when I was still in Brainerd, I had 2 summers. I had a yard service that I ran, mowed lawns for different people. Usually get about $1 a time. At that time, that was usually 4 hours work. It was with a reel mower, reel type, no rotary.
Okay.
And
the spinning blade.
Spinning blade and clipping all the weeds along the edges.
Okay.
And I saved my money. And in Brainerd, I learned to ride a bike. I bought one old one for $15. Learned to ride on it, and then sold it for $15. And bought a brand new 1946 Columbia.
A what?
Columbia bike.
A bicycle.
Yeah. And I kept that until I went in service.
Okay. So what was your first car then?
I didn't get my first car till I was 21. And that was a
Okay.
1946 Nash Ambassador.
I have no idea what that is.
But it was an upside down bathtub. That's what it looked like.
So a Nash.
Nash.
That was that's the Ford, Chevy, whatever
No, it was Nash.
was
It
the maker.
Was the maker.
Okay.
They went. Nash became American Motors,
Okay.
and my second car was a '49 Plymouth Coupe that needed a rain job. Take off in a cloud of blue smoke.
Okay. So a coupe would be a 2-seater?
2-seater, a 1-seater with a kind of a back area where you could carry stuff.
A 1-seat car.
Two seats in the front. That's
Okay.
it. Nothing, no seat in the back.
Oh, okay.
It was a coupe. And
Open wheel wells.
no, it wasn't open,
Okay.
but there was an area like it was like a salesman's car. They could carry all their stuff in there, in the back part there.
Do you remember what you paid for it?
Oh, I paid $250 for the Ambassador, and I think I paid traded in the Ambassador for and paid another $150 for the
Huh.
But I took the heater went wrong on the Ambassador. I took it into the Nash dealer in Minneapolis. They fixed the heater, and then as I was driving down the road, the car conked out on me. And lo and behold, there was their tow truck right behind.
Huh.
Just conveniently.
Yeah.
They want to sell me a older Nash. So I looked around and found this 49 Plymouth at a different dealer and made the deal.
Huh.
Never trusted Minneapolis Nash after that.
No, I wouldn't either. All right. Okay, so any other car? What was your favorite car then?
Well, of course, I was like Chevys. I was a kid. I always thought the Chevys were great. I know when the new models came out, that was a big deal. Every kid went down to the local dealers and looked at the new Fords, the new Chevys. In Pine River, we had the Pine Motors was the Chevy dealer, and Sherwood, Houston was the Ford dealer, and Cater Motors was Pontiac dealer, and he also did Buicks. There was no Studebaker dealer in town. That was in Brainerd where they had those, and the Nash dealer was in Brainerd. So,
Okay.
in Cadillac, you didn't buy a Cadillac. That was in Brainerd, had Cadillac dealer. But the undertaker said that if he bought a Cadillac, people would quit doing business with him because they made too much money.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was a small town
Okay.
effect, I guess.
So you went to graduated from high school.
Graduated. Well, see, I told you I had that year worked at the Red Owl. The next year I worked at a resort. Next summer
Okay.
at Pinecrest Resort. It was near Bacchus, and I worked there for the summer. And there I got my first chance to use a rotary lawnmower
A rotary lawnmower.
with a spinning blade.
Okay.
You know,
Not
like they have
a
now.
push mower.
Yeah.
So I had a
Well,
motor on
We
it.
still have pushing. Yeah, it had a motor on it, and it cut grass like crazy.
Sure.
And I took care of the lawns with that, and take care of the boats and stuff like that, and any
Sounds
place
like
you're needed.
A fun job.
Oh yeah, didn't get much money, but I got room and board, and I worked that summer for them, and then the next summer, let's see, I think started working at the lumber yard, Pine River Lumber Yard, piling lumber. And those were the days before the dry kiln, to cure lumber before it was planed.
Okay.
So it had to air dry for a year before it was
For a year.
for a year. So I was paid $1 for 100 board feet.
Huh.
So I had to put at each corner I had to put wooden blocks to keep the wood off the ground, and I'd pile it 3 boards, in a row, and then make a triangle, and one on top of the other until then
Okay.
another piece of board in between, so that
So
they
they
would
don't.
air dry.
So would these be 2x4s or?
They'd be anything from 1x3s or 1x2s to 2x4s, 12 foot long.
Okay.
We didn't usually get much bigger lumber than that. And of course, they'd get my total and they'd have their total from the sawmill, and they had to agree. In fact, half the time they didn't even bother at the sawmill to figure out how much they had cut. They'd use my totals.
All right.
That was kind of neat.
Sure.
It was kind of fun too. And then the next year I went I took that vocational program where I went to work half a day at the locker plant and half a day at school. spent the morning in school. In the afternoon, I went to work at the locker plant. That was,
What'd you do at the locker plant?
oh, I did anything they asked me to do. I cut meat,
Huh.
and I can remember we cut up 175 deer that fall, and then we'd cut up cows and pigs for the different farmers, and a lot of people would rent a locker to store their meat. By that time, people had refrigerators in there.
Sure. And you would add what to cut the meat then? Regular? Would you
We
have,
had a
would have
meat
saws?
big bandsaw,
Okay.
and we'd cut it up. We did a pretty good job and did it, and we'd get it all cut, and then we'd wrap it. And it was wrapping so that it would last in the freezer.
So the locker would they sell retail?
They had a little retail, but they're a small town like that, they didn't sell much. They'd maybe make one batch of ground beef for the whole day.
Huh.
And
Sure.
And-
And ground beef wouldn't have been a real staple, or
no, but a lot of people bought it, you know.
Hmm.
And of course, at that time there was Carl's Market was the main one in town, and he had a good business. He was a good businessman, and he ran a meat market too. So it was competition for the locker, but we did a lot of work for the hotel and stuff like that in town,
okay.
and a lot of commercial that way. We'd order stuff for not Howard Hughes, but Mr. Hughes, who ran the hotel. We'd get the roasts and stuff made up for him, and very lean, how I liked him. And
Huh.
while I worked at the locker plant, I got to meet the famous artist Les Koba,
Okay.
who designed the logo for Coca-Cola.
Oh, really?
Yes. He was also a great wildlife artist. I think he made about his paintings were on at least 10 or 12 duck stamps.
Okay.
And I got to meet him. I worked with his brother, Ernie Koba. And he was a very talented person also, but he got married right out of high school and never went went into the art world,
Okay.
so.
Let's go back to your parents. What was your mother like?
Well, I didn't get to know her that long, because
Yeah.
but I thought she was just normal mother,
Okay. Was she tall?
She wasn't really tall.
It's
Dad
kind of
was
hard
taller.
hard to imagine when you're
Yeah,
young.
of course, when you're young, all the people are tall.
Yeah. Did she sing or anything, or?
No, I don't remember hearing her sing.
Okay. And then what, like your dad, what was he like?
Well, he was a very well liked person, and especially my cousin's stuff just adored him. He was a favorite uncle.
And any idea why that was?
His personality, he was very
Charismatic?
very charismatic. Yes. And his younger brother, Virgil, was the only one that went to college. He graduated from St. Cloud State, and he was at Clarissa. He was known as the Iron Man of Clarissa. He set records in high school that weren't broken until 1948.
That's Virgil?
Virgil. Dad didn't do too well as far as education. He quit school in 8th grade.
Okay.
Things were a little rough back then, I guess, because he had to wear his sister's shoes to school.
Yeah, that wouldn't have gone.
That didn't set well with him, so he went out on his own and went out to the Dakotas to work at a ranch.
Okay.
Then he found out that cowboy's life was not what you thought it was.
Sure. Sure.
So he always told me, you get your education, because he was sorry that he didn't.
Sure. And then what you did, you went to the University of
Yeah, I
Minnesota?
didn't. I ran out of money, and then Uncle Sam called, and I never did get finished getting a degree yet, but I did get a lot of courses that helped me in later life.
Okay. Okay, so Uncle Sam called you, went to the Army for
Yes, in
2 years.
December of 54, I was drafted.
Okay. So you're drafted, there was a war.
There was no war, but I was drafted anyway.
Oh.
You had to serve 2 years back then.
Okay.
2 years, and then it was actually an 8-year commitment. You had 2 years, the active duty, 2 years of reserves, active reserves, and then 4 years of inactive reserve. So,
Okay. I'm going to pause a second.
okay.